On the one side are the salwar kameez-clad terrorists brandishing their AK-47s and their Kalashnikov rifles, wearing their traditional garb to impose their religious will on Afghanistan. But on the other side, and this has only been recently revealed, is a militia, a special operations unit of the Taliban that is being deployed not just in Kabul but elsewhere as well, that has provided a completely different picture. No more just the sons of farmers and shepherds, a ragtag bunch of religious terrorists, but a special operations group that is comparable, perhaps, with the best in the world. When you think of the Taliban, you think of that stereotypical terrorist image in their traditional garb wielding a Kalashnikov rifle. An image visible very clearly when they posed inside Kabul's presidential palace. But the Taliban's muscle has another side to it. What you're looking at is the Badri 313 battalion, a special commando-style unit that is securing the Taliban's hold over Kabul and other parts of Afghanistan. As the Taliban took over the presidential palace, the Badri 313 fanned out across Kabul, keeping a hawk's eye on any reprisals. And in case you hadn't noticed, the Badri 313 looks like any modern special forces unit. Take a close look at this image of the unit. Observe how well equipped the soldiers are. Apart from that big Taliban flag they're wielding, soldiers wield modern assault rifles, modern firearms, updated combat clothing including protective vests and pads, and even night vision optical devices attached to their combat helmets. While training and tactics are definitely everything, a cursory look at the Badri 313 in comparison to Indian and Pakistani special forces shows that they definitely look at least geared for the part. Earlier comprised of a mix of militant groups, the Badri 313 now operates with the Taliban. The name of the unit originates from the Battle of Badr, in which Muhammad led a victorious army of 313 men. Indoctrinated with the Taliban's brand of militant Islam, with a name that harks back to an ancient religious war, but kitted out for the modern battlefield. The Badri 313 train like any commando unit, with all manner of tactical, storming and attack training conducted at undisclosed locations in the hinterland. The high-quality images released on social media by the Badri 313 last week also appear pointed at serving a purpose. Experts believe it could be the Taliban sending out a signal that they aren't a ragtag movement of farmers and shepherds who live by stealing weapons, but have embraced modern military methods, even special forces operation tactics. The Badri 313 unit has already begun to secure Kabul and other areas, imposing the will of the Taliban. With the Taliban now in power, there's every reason to believe that the militia could grow in strength. Expect to see much more of the Badri 313 in the weeks and months ahead. Bureau Report, India Today. So what we've just shown you is a special operations unit of the Taliban, pictures that most people have never seen before, providing an image that most people would never associate with the Taliban. But as Gaurav's now going to show you, it's not just this military unit, but the kind of huge jackpot of weaponry that the Taliban has managed to capture thanks to the Afghan National Army simply disintegrating overnight. Gaurav, tell us about those weapons.
The weapons that the Taliban now have access to, and that is a cause for concern for the world. Why? Take a look at some of these weapons. Top end of the fleet, 22 Super Tucano light attack aircraft. Taliban now have access to light attack aircraft. Now these aircraft are designed to carry out low-level attack missions on enemy targets. Taliban now have fighter aircraft. These Tucanos can be fitted with these Paveway 3 laser-guided bombs designed precisely for precision strikes on targets. Once again, take a look. What is it that the Taliban have access to? Attack helicopters and on precision-guided munition. Then, they've captured 6 Mi-24 heavy attack helicopters, incidentally gifted to the Afghan Air Force by India in 2019. Now, these are formidable gunships capable of fearsome low-level attack in ground fire conditions. Now, among the whole, and this again is a cause for grave concern, 11 American MD-530 light armed helicopters designed for rapid low-level attack missions and for special operations. This again is a cause for grave concern. The Taliban have captured one of the largest fleets outside America of this aircraft, the iconic Black Hawk. The Black Hawk helicopter, battle-hardened, tried and tested in the most difficult conflict conditions for troop transport and much more. Large number of helicopters familiar to us in India have also now fallen into Taliban hands, which means at least 75 Mi-17 medium lift transport helicopters, sturdy, reliable, flexible in high altitude, in difficult conditions, and for all manner of military utility flying. So apart from these aircraft, the Taliban also have valuable intelligence gathering aircraft now. The Swiss-made PC-12 special mission aircraft, basically designed for tactical spying and rapid transport. Now, if you think, how will the Taliban be able to fly these aircraft? We'll also get to the answer of that big question. The biggest aircraft the Taliban now have access to, believe it or not, the C-130 Hercules. This is one aircraft that's used by the Indian Air Force, by the American Air Force, by air forces, modern air forces almost across the world. Taliban have access to C-130 Hercules, capable of special operations even from unprepared runways, hugely flexible for a number of military transport operations, including special forces operations. If the Taliban can get them off the ground, imagine what this means for the Taliban. Over to you, Shiv.
Thanks very much, Gaurav, for getting us a lowdown on just the surface of what the Taliban has basically been able to inherit. Gaurav has just covered the aircraft. What we've shown you here on 5 Live are also the Special Operations Unit and the weaponry that the Taliban has been able to inherit. We've just decoded for you what the Badri 313 unit looks like. Now, this is something that the people in Afghanistan have been aware of, but people outside Afghanistan, unless you're very, very interested in these little-known special forces groups, you wouldn't know very much about them. So let's just quickly summarize for you what is new about this. The Badri 313 is a commando-style special unit that conducts itself with special forces training. It's trained for area protection. That's the reason why you see these soldiers now deployed all across Kabul. They're also trained for special operations and for special assault. They're trained for house storming operations. You can see from the way they are dressed that they are, they look very much like modern commandos. They're armed with pretty up-to-date firearms, carbines and assault rifles. They're also appearing to be armed with protective gear, comparable to the best in the business. They're also armed with night vision devices. If you look at those optical devices attached to the helmets, those are night vision devices for low light conditions and low light special operations missions. So these are, on the face of it at least, this appears to be a pretty well-armed and well-trained special operations unit. But let's hear from the experts what they think, because very few people actually know much about the Badri 313. Very privileged to be joined this evening here on 5 Live by Major General G.G. Dwivedi. He's a war veteran, former Assistant Chief of the Army. We also have with us Sandeep Punithan, Executive Editor, India Today, Major General V.K. Datta, who's an ex-commander of the 51 Special Action Group and a well-known Special Forces veteran. General Datta, I'd like to come to you first, sir. As someone who, knows all about special forces, training, tactics, equipment, the way they're supposed to function, what is your initial assessment of this Badri 313 battalion, sir? The images, came out as part of a large social media exercise just a few days ago. To the untrained eye, they appear to be well-equipped, well-clad, some up-to-date equipment. What do you think, sir, as a Special Forces veteran?
Okay. Having seen the visuals and the feedback which we are receiving from Afghanistan, as far as the uniforms are concerned, the equipment is concerned, the dress is concerned, it really does not make much of a difference. Because you could be wearing a salwar kameez and you are a commando, provided you have the equipment you need for the mission, and you could be wearing special equipment. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, sir. We can hear you
audible?
loud and clear.
Okay. So, see, the dress by itself does not make much of a difference. The main issue is the training, motivation, and the type of operation they have been trained to handle. So once when we join Special Forces, we carry out all kind of training, all kind of terrains. We are trained to handle all kinds of equipment. And we are trained to carry out covert and clandestine operations too. So fine, if I am today wearing a high-end equipment, I could be wearing a salwar kameez the next day.
Very true.
So therefore, wearing a particular dress does not make much of a difference.
Absolutely. In fact, Sandeep, that is so true. Special forces are not always in their combat gear. They're sometimes, wearing whatever they, have access to blend in, with the environment. But what is your assessment, Sandeep? Does it stand to reason that these guys of the Badri 313 are well trained, probably have access to some pretty decent amount of special operations training, or is this just a whole bunch of social media propaganda? Sandeep, can you hear me? Okay, what a pity. General Dwivedi, if I could put that question to you, sir, how would you assess... we've got that out of the way, that the clothing and the equipment doesn't really make much of a difference. It's about the training and the, what kind of resources you have access to. How would you assess the Badri 313?
Firstly, Shiv, pleasure to be on your channel.
And pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you. You are discussing a very, I think, interesting subject which most of the people aren't really aware. So firstly, if you look at this 313 unit, you got to look at the larger, framework as to how the Taliban has evolved since last 20 years. And I have been following it very closely. I think overall, there is a definite improvement in their structures, in their fighting, and also in their training. Now, having said that, so when you look at this unit, well, General Datta is right that clothing may not per se be very important, but you see the deportment, you see the attitude, you see the body language. When you put
they don't look like, you're trying to say they don't look like guerrilla fighters. They don't look like the ragtag guerrilla fighters. They look like proper commandos.
Yes, that's what I said. You should be able to pick up the deportment, body language, how they are actually being, projected. So to that extent, I like to actually bring out two very important issues. These Special Forces units also are trained for specific tasks. Like I was in Special Forces, I was trained for high altitude warfare. I think this unit primarily must be trained for urban warfare because they have been brought it into Kabul.
So
therefore, their expertise would be more into the urban warfare and also possibly at VIP protection, protection of their vital assets, and also combat in the urban environment. Now, that is one take I possibly feel they're trained for. Secondly, I think they have been trained well, because the Pakistan was the mentors, and I'm sure they must have given them adequate training, because you pick up Special Forces from a very large pool of trained people. You pick up best of the best. And I'm sure these guys must have been picked up, because after all, they are going to guard something like the palace and also the VIP areas, and they must be very trusted people, because you can't have untrustworthy people. So I think we need to take it a bit seriously, and this unit, as it appears, they are trained professionally, they are equipped professionally, and I'm sure that they must be ready for the tasks that have been assigned to them.
Okay, and now that the Taliban is power, General Datta, and I'm going to wait for Sandeep Punithan to join us back, and I'm going to ask our producers to tell me when he's back. But General Datta, what kind, give us a glimpse of what kind of training actually happens. The Badri 313 on social media has put out a few small clips of their training, which looks like the routine stuff, the firing, the running, the tactical training. But as someone from the Special Forces, sir, give us an idea of what it takes to actually make a Special Forces soldier. It's not that easy to simply say, ye ek special unit hai.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When we talk about special forces, it means troops which are specially selected, specially trained, and specially equipped for the mission for which they have been raised.
Yeah.
So it is special selection, special training, special equipment, and specific to task. So that becomes the first fundamental of your selection process.
Yeah.
Then, as far as the training part is concerned, the physical fitness, the psychological build-up, your training in tactics, the training in technical handling of all kind of equipment, and the type of mission you might be put into. So it is a very complex thing. It is not that you are a macho. It is a combination of the brains and brawn. It is a combination of the tactics and the equipment which you're going to use.
Yes.
And finally, when we say a special forces man is equal to 10 normal infantry boys. So one boy can do something with the 10 other boys will be required to do.
Yeah.
So therefore, the paratrooper is a skydiver. He can drive. He can do deep sea diving. He can handle a motorboat. He can do a paragliding. He can handle all kind of weapons. He can handle all kind of radio.
Truly special. There's a reason why the word special is attached, because it applies, across every aspect, from the training to what they're capable of to how they are selected.
It is a combination of both.
Absolutely.
And that's why we say special forces. It is just not a man with good muscles.
Yeah.
It is a brain in the brawn. And the tactics and the technique.
No, absolutely true. I'm glad the both of you have, dispelled this notion that a commando always has to look muscle-bound and very well-equipped. As General Dwivedi and General Datta, both Special Forces veterans, have said, you can look like anything and still be an absolutely lethal commando. So don't be too much taken in by these images. But Sandeep has been looking very deeply at Special Forces all around the world, and he's written about them extensively. Sandeep, lots of wisdom from the two veteran Special Forces officers we have on our panel. What is your assessment of this Badri 313? Not very much known about them. Suddenly this social media explosion with, very well-produced imagery coming out. What do you think about them, Sandeep? Should we be fooled by all the soft focus weapons and all this stuff? A lot of glitz attached, but what's the reality?
Well, Shiv, it's not very surprising because from 2017 onwards, the Taliban had fielded what was called the red units. There's a Pashtun word for it called Sara Kheta, which means red unit. And these were special Taliban units that were attacking at night. And this was a big surprise for the Afghan forces because the Taliban were not known to have night fighting capabilities.
Yes.
So they had raised these special units with night fighting capabilities, the best equipment, rocket propelled grenades, anti-tank weapons, night vision devices, the works. And they were using them in special missions. They inflicted a lot of casualties on the Afghan units. Beginning from 2017 on, and in the province of Helmand.
Yes.
So there has been a fair amount written and known about these units. And my guess is that the Badri 313 Brigade is nothing but a rebranded red team of the Taliban. And Badri 313 is a kind of Islamist. The 313 is very important in Islam because it's the 313 fighters that accompanied the Prophet in the Battle of Badr. And Al-Qaeda is also known to have a 313 brigade.
Yes.
So this is very likely a rebranded red team of the Taliban with the best weapons and best equipment. And Shiv, the point that you made about the social media impact of it. Let's not forget Taliban 2.0 is very different from Taliban 1.0. You're talking of guys who are very net savvy, social media friendly, and these are exactly the kind of images that they know will make an impact across the world. It really helps them make a mark and to say that we are not your regular shalwar and sandal wearing guerrilla, but here we are like the rest of the special forces around the world. It's a very powerful recruitment tool as well, Shiv.
Absolutely.
Besides, rebranding the Taliban, giving them a certain legitimacy of the kind that you would see with other, special forces around the world.
I'm glad you brought that aspect out, Sandeep, because you understand it so well. The social media aspect is hugely important because of recruitment, providing that air of legitimacy to the Taliban in its ongoing, public relations overdrive, trying to be mainstreamed by entities across the world. There are many here in India who are already doing it. But General Dwivedi, apart from being a special operations unit that we don't know very much about, as Sandeep brought out, the name of this unit, Badri 313, has religious roots. The battle of Badr, which goes back to Prophet Muhammad. So this is, in many ways, under the Taliban, a religiously indoctrinated group that has received this kind of commando training. You are a veteran of the 1971 war, sir. You know all about religious indoctrination as well. Going forward, how much of a threat could, entities of this kind be? Religious indoctrination as well as modern military techniques.
Well, Chief, I think all soldiers have to be indoctrinated because after all, you win the battle with spirit of the men and you fight with the weapons, So indoctrination, motivation is very important. But every unit and every culture has a different mode of, motivation. And as Taliban, they are highly ideological outfit and they draw their motivation from the religious fervor. And so therefore the name has been aptly kept, as per, drawn from the historical Operation Badr which is of very high significance. And name itself, Badr, has a very high religious overtone. Having said that, you have to understand 2-3 very important things. Firstly, the special forces have the capability to operate in small teams. That means they can cover very large area and they can, cooperate in teams of 2s and 3s. And therefore, that is one very important aspect. Generally, the conventional forces fight together in the subunits of platoons and companies. The special forces fight in very small detachments. Point number one. So therefore, the motivation has to be very high.
Right.
Because they don't have the officer leadership all along. They are led by detachments, which are NCOs and others. So therefore, they have to have very high level of motivation. And this unit definitely is motivated from the religious roots and religious overtones. A second point is that they have tremendous resilience to fight on for a long period of time without being maintained, without being sustained. So they have tremendous capacity to self-sustain for a very long period. And thirdly, they can take independent missions in a small team. They don't require, someone breathing on the neck. So they have a lot of carte blanche freedom to carry out the operations. Shiv.
Sandeep, the fact that the Badri 313 has come out in this manner is very interesting. We had an image, just for the sake of a visual reference, and I want to put that image on our screen. It's a 3-window image comparing what the Badri 313 looked like and a very generic comparison of what the Indian Special Forces look like, the Pakistani Special Services Group look like, and what, these guys look like, the Badri 313. Now, I know this is a superficial comparison because any kind of comparison of units of this kind has to go way, way deeper than this into all the aspects that we've just discussed. But in terms of access to this equipment, all this material, does it surprise you, or is this totally par for the course, Sandeep?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all, Shiv, because Afghanistan has been at war for the last 20 years or more.
Yeah.
It's awash with equipment of the kinds that, the cutting edge US equipment, literally night vision devices, communication gear, tactical equipment, plate carriers, boots, all the works, so it's not a surprise at all to see them equipped the way they are. And in fact, there have been cases in the last 5 or 6 years of these equipment, US supplied equipment finding its way into Jammu and Kashmir. And the big worry is that it was a trickle earlier, 5 or 6 years back. But given the vast quantities that are now lying in Afghanistan, there's every possibility it could turn into a flood. But having said that, this is a danger to the entire region, Shiv. If you have these kind of special forces units religiously indoctrinated running around there, who's to say that Afghanistan is not going to become what it was prior to 2001, which was a training and breeding ground for terrorists all across the world. And you had fighters coming from, from the Philippines to Chechnya and, learning the dark arts. I visited one of those terror training schools myself about 20 years back. And I know the kind of equipping that was going on there, the training. And so there's every possibility that this could actually happen once again under Taliban 2.0. Shiv.
Sandeep, General Datta, General Dwivedi, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being with me on this extremely enlightening and enriching show. We're glad we were able to throw some light on something that most people don't talk about. And the reason we picked it up is because there is an interest in this, but not a lot of authentic information. And what better authentic information can one have than two veterans of the Special Forces and a journalist who's written more about the Special Forces and more credibly than perhaps anyone else in the country. So thanks to the three of you for telling us a little bit more and equipping us to understand groups like the Badri 313 and the Taliban a whole lot better. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with me.